I don't know much about wrestling, but I do know me some grapplers. For as long as mankind has learned to use his hands, ever has he strove to master the art of throwing another man into the dirt. Wrestling is a tradition older than civilization itself, with origins in nearly every culture in history. Some cultures wrestle for sport, as a contest of strength. Some cultures wrestle as a matter of ritual and spiritualism. But today we are looking at what is known in modern day as pro wrestling, the art of wrestling as a form of performance. What began in the 19th century as a sideshow attraction at carnivals has since evolved into a billion-dollar entertainment gigalith that demands as much attention as television and film, where superstar titans slam each other onto the mat in contests of power, grit, and raw determination. There is, of course, a catch to all of this, a secret to which everyone is privy. Professional wrestling is staged, and the outcomes of each bout are already predetermined by script. That's not to say that wrestling is fake. Those are still real athletes out there performing real stunts. But it would be incorrect to call pro wrestling a contest or even a fight. In essence, pro wrestling is an acrobatic performance designed to resemble a battle. As someone who is not into wrestling, I've only learned what I can through cultural osmosis, proximity to a bunch of friends who are into wrestling, what research I've committed to this video, and YouTubers like Super Eyepatchwolf and Daryl Talks Games. If any of my takes are incorrect, please feel free to correct me in the comments. However, it is still my intent to interpret how fighting games translate the bombast and theatrics of professional wrestling. So how do you fake a fight between two large wrestlemen? In a lot of ways, pro wrestling borrows a lot of elements from classical theater to convince audiences that these big strong men are really hurting each other, even if they technically aren't. Performing live combat in classical theater often means employing huge exaggeration in your attacks. Big telegraphs and wide swings are employed for the sake of staging and visibility to ensure that even someone sitting in the back row of the theater can see what's happening. Likewise, someone sitting at the farthest seat of the stadium needs to see what's happening in the ring, so when wrestlers swing, they really swing. In fact, when wrestlers throw punches, they often stomp the mat at the same time to create a vibration and a sound, so those watching can hear and feel an impact. But wrestling is a team effort, and it's not just enough to swing big. A wrestler also needs to know how to convincingly take a hit. So even reacting physically to an incoming attack requires a lot of physical exaggeration to convince an audience that you've been hurt. This is what's called selling a hit. Not just for taking strikes, but also for setting up big elaborate throws and takedowns. When wrestler A lifts wrestler B over his head, wrestler B needs to kick himself off the floor to help wrestler A hoist him over, turning this entire maneuver into a two-man effort. Of course, staging is just one reason why wrestling moves look the way they do. The other reason is purely for safety. These wrestlers aren't actually trying to hurt each other, but they need to look like they are. So they'll do things like chop their entire arm on a guy's chest or kick with the broadside of the leg, which would actually disperse the impact across a wider surface area and make it deal less damage, but that's why the other wrestler needs to sell that hit. It's a lot of work to convince a whole arena of viewers that two men are violently slamming into each other at full force, which is why the techniques in pro wrestling have so many measures and contingencies for both believability and safety. Even without taking fighting games into account, the mere concept of wrestling video games carries an exciting promise. What if a wrestling match wasn't a work? Wrestling games have existed for a long time with the shared goal of putting the pro wrestling experience in the hands of players, creating their own dream matches and effectively choreographing their own piece of muscle theater in real time. But the goal of a wrestling game is rarely ever to provide a floor for competition. It's to capture the authentic pro wrestling experience, whether or not it uses real wrestling licenses. Recreating the essence of pro wrestling means being as accurate to the real thing as possible, which creates a bizarre irony because of wrestling's nature as a performance act. So in order for a wrestling video game to feel authentic, it needs to feel fake. Digital wrestlers still need to sell hits and perform attacks with all the safety measures that real wrestlers use, even if they don't have to worry about the safety of digital actors or to convince the player that the fake violence is real. But what if a video game didn't have to take these precautions? What if a video game didn't need to worry about the long-term health of its digital wrestlers and allow them to perform insane stunts and high-flying throws at full power?
I am the protector of Russia's sky, Siberian Blizzard!
In the same way that fighting games bring out the fantastical power of martial arts, fighting games also unleash the power of wrestling as we like to imagine it. In a way, it's like seeing the training weights come off, as fighting game wrestlers no longer have to hold back on account of their opponent's safety. For example, when a real-life wrestler performs a powerbomb, they sort of toss the other wrestler so they have a chance to pratfall safely onto the mat to prevent themselves from hurting their spine. But when Alex does a powerbomb? Oof! In a weird, ironic way, fighting game wrestlers make pro wrestling more real than real-life wrestlers. I don't think there's much more I could say to elaborate on how powerful wrestling feels in fighting games, when we could just instead watch a big wrestling montage, so yeah, let's just do that. Of course, I could not end this video without putting a spotlight on the most absurd and awesome thing to come out of wrestling and fighting games. The King of Fighters All-Star WWE crossover, featuring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, John Cena, Becky Lynch, Kofi Kingston, Seth Rollins, and The Undertaker. Somehow combining the qualities of both wrestling games and fighting games, the WWE characters get to perform authentic moves and stunts, but with their power cranked up to insane fighting game levels. What if The Rock Bottom just blasted a guy 10 feet into the air? What if John Cena could deliver a 5-knuckle shuffle from a 5-foot jump? What if The Undertaker just had powers? Even as someone who is not into wrestling, I can see how something like this showcases what is exciting about wrestling, giving staged stunts the power that they should have in fiction.
Select your fighting style!
That's all for today's a.b.i.torial. Be sure to give this video a like and leave a comment about your thoughts about wrestling and fighting games. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more content from SugarPunch. We have a Patreon where patrons get early access to all future videos and the ability to vote on future episodes and style select, so be sure to check it out if you'd like to support the channel. I'm a.b.i., and I'll see you next time.